Here we go. You dipped, Daniel? You dipped? Why are you a dip?
Is this place real? That depends. If real is what you can feel, smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Pikachu, I have in my hand 2 pills. You take the blue pill, and the story ends now. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the Diglett hole goes. But be warned, dive too deep, and you may never return.
All right. It is time. This infinite investment game. I'll talk about alternative investments and collectibles. This is not particularly investment advice, but if you listen to this, you'll be a better collector. You make smarter decisions with your money with collectibles. Specifically, I want to talk about grading in the TCG market and the sports card market. Really, the collectible card market as it relates to the major grading companies. And I think people really need to hear this. But before we go on, please like, comment, and subscribe and share as many people as possible. Also, I am on Instagram and I am on TikTok, which I really post on TikTok, where it's the infinite investment game. All right. So I am going to be talking about the accountability grading. Obviously, people know that Alt is suing Beckett. And the reason why they're suing him, I believe, has to do with like trimming cards, Beckett grading trimming cards, trim cards. There's multiple altered and trim cards that are sitting in Beckett slabs, sitting in PSA slabs, and there's many people in the sports card hobby, whether, card worn, AIH has talked about this. I believe Dan the Cardman has talked about this. A lot of people, sports car radios, talk about this. This is not a surprise. This is not a surprise at all. Even if people at Card Ladder have talked about trim cards, altered cards, or swap patches and all this other stuff and fake cards, this has always been in the sports card market and TCG card market, and this will always be in this. There's less trimming in TCG, specifically, Pokemon, Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! Some people are buying One Piece cards right now in Attack on Titan. You see less trimming, but these cards are newer, and a lot of the corners, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is more sharp, but everything is more rounded with Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards as well. But Pokemon, all these other TCG cards are more rounded, as opposed to sports cards, which have sharper edges and corners, which honestly, especially the newer cards, I think the grading is much better, just because if you think about it, when you look at IPL and just the newer cards are just easy to grade, and yeah, I really just think it's overall quality, so that's why you see the higher grades. When you go into other sports cards, I guess it gets harder just because you have the different grading companies. So PSA, SGC, BGS, and CSG. But when you look at on the other end of the spectrum, for TCG, instead of CSG, you have CGC. All these companies have different owners. Obviously, CGC's and CSG is owned by technically BlackRock, which is a major investment firm. And then you have Collectors Universe that owns PSA. And Beckett is still a big company, as SGC is probably the smallest company, and has a hold on the American market. And then all of these, I believe, are now privately traded. So you could invest in PSA, but you can't now since this went private.
months have been very scary for the average investor, whether it's inflation, interest rates, gas prices, home equity value, all this stuff that's taking place. I mean, some of the numbers, the average investor this year lost roughly 44%. The 60-40 portfolio that's been used for many, many years is down 34%. It's worse in nearly 100 years.
All of these companies have different owners, and the grading skills can be similar. You would expect if something gets a PSA 9, you can send to BGS, it gets a BGS 9 or SGC, so it should be easy to cross grade. That's not always the case. There's certain things where PSA doesn't look at centering as much, but BGS is harder on centering. That's just like an example. I believe PSA looks more closely on surface area, where BGS and I believe SGC doesn't really focus as much on surface area, the surface. So these are major things here, but I think it becomes problematic when you crack things out of the case. Most people are cracking cases to send it to another company to hopefully get a higher grade, which boosts the value so they can sell it for more.
I remember being in this hobby and talking to many, I'm going to call them Viites, many people who came in following the Gary V, mug life, flip it mentality, who were like, this card's not worth my time if I can't 2x it by the next month. If I can't 5x something, it's not worth my time. Meanwhile, we're holding out these other asset classes, these huge Warhols, these pieces that made 14% year over year for somebody as like a monstrous, amazing investment. Cards can be that. The thing is, cards have always been that. That's not what a lot of people who came into cards in the last year want cards to be.
Very rarely they crack the case because they just want another case. A lot of times they'll just send it into grade with the same case. And even cross grading is hard, whether it's in the case or not. You're really gambling because it's still humans who are grading. And let's be honest here. People have bad days, people have good days, and people could make a mistake as far as grading. Or I've seen this thing where you send a bunch of the same cards and they make a mistake of which one they slab. So it could be two that have really great grades and then one that has a nick or something. So the two with the great grades are supposed to get a 10, the other one that has the nick or a damage should get a 9. And they switch it for whatever reason, and one of the nicked ones get the PSA 10, and the other one that was perfectly fine gets the PSA 9. I've seen that happen before, and it will probably continue to happen again. I think that would be more strict to have maybe more people looking at it. I know for the newer stuff, they're spending less time reviewing the cards. And it's different from comic books, right? So for comics, you could press a card. I mean, you can press the book and you can do other things to restore the image or the value. But you can't do that in cards. That's why the whole thing with cursed card care was such a major issue.
Happens when you be smoking that stuff. Drugs is cringe.
But people need to understand this opinion. And most people, the reason they're just looking at the case and it's like, oh, it's worth so much more money, but they're not looking at the actual card. That becomes problematic. That also becomes problematic. I mean, if you're a collector, that's fine. That's on you. But I think if people are trying to, and even if people are trying to flip, I think they can get their hands out of it. But there's so many people who've gotten into this and who wants to invest, this is why this is so silly. This isn't going to work out long term because of issues like this. And, those be the cars where it'd be hard to sell. They're going to sell for significantly less, even though they have a higher grade. And I think that's going to catch up with a lot of people. They need to find a way to have accountability. I don't think it's really going to happen anytime soon. I think for tag, I think it's going to take a while before they can be able to do this with AI grading, which is really interesting. Maybe you have AI grading and then you have humans to double check and look over it. Eventually that becomes a area where you need less people working in the company to get this done. So eventually there'll be layoffs, but there's not that many people really grading cards to begin with and have that skill. The other issue is with a lot of these grading companies for cars that are close and have really great customers. Certain people who always use their services. Not only they get really nice deals, but there has been talk of people getting favorable grades. So for Beckett, I've heard this a lot. That's why a lot of people say Beckett is a scam in a sense for the black labels, is that people are sending in Beckett card or cards to Beckett, specific group submitters, and they're getting mostly BGS 10s or they're getting mostly black labels, which are both extremely hard. Black labels should be near impossible. It's kind of almost winning the lottery almost. And to put this in perspective, normally for BGS, there's about a 4% chance for most cars to 2 to 4 or 5% chance it gets a 9.5. For PSA 10, is normally 1 to 2% that a car can get a PSA 10. And we're talking about for like more modern stuff, let's say a refractor PSA 10 2003 went in. That will probably be the gem rate. And that's probably like the difference between the two. And then for BGS 10, it's less than 1%, maybe it's 0.8% or something like that. And then a black label is like 0.1%, 0.01%, something like that. Some of the cards though will, I how can I put this? If you look at TCG, the think cards that people seem to like the most is PSA has a strong hold, and then CGC. I think people slowly but surely are gonna fall into CGC, and then there's a few people who really like Beckett for certain things because certain cards like Dragon Ball Z, I believe One Piece, and even Final Fantasy, these things are able to get BGS 10s at a much higher rate. Which means they're going to sell because they're so much more rare than a PSA 10. They're going to sell for more. But if you really look at this, you will know that SGC is a viable company. But I don't think over time, I think the SGC 10 cards and gold cards will probably end up being less, which would be a nice deal, and it'd be nice to collect and get it. But I don't think it's going to have a premium on the market. But yeah, this proves that grading is just a opinion. I've seen certain things where certain PSA cards, were 9 and they go to SGC it's a 6 or vice versa. Also, here's something else that people aren't talking about. All these companies are in competition with each other. So what they could do, somebody could crack a card and then, have it graded with them. I think it's more likely that they crack a card and then they have it graded with them